Hello, you guys. This is Josh Vision, and I'm here in my Season 2, Episode 6 review and discussion video on The Last Kingdom. So, in this episode, we have, basically, Ethelred royally screws up. And obviously, the point of this video is to tell you how this comes about. So, we open up, basically, this episode with the marriage of Ethelred and Ethelflaed, Alfred's daughter. But before that even happened, there's an interesting event that happens with Uhtred and Ethelred. So Ethelred and his men and his earldom friend, I forgot his name, basically they come about Uhtred and his wife Gisela as they make their way towards, for the wedding of Ethelflaed. So Ethelred just being a jerk, basically. He's making fun of Uhtred and especially his wife, to the point that Uhtred, just as a husband, as a man, he basically punks Ethelred and basically has him at knife point until, until Ethelred's earldom friend basically says, yo, chill, relax. He apologizes for basically crossing the line. So after that, we see Uhtred and Gisela, they make their way back, well, not way back, but they make their way onward towards Wessex. So after that, we have this interesting scene between Ethelred and his earldom friend. And he talks about how he doesn't like Uhtred and how Uhtred doesn't like him, and how all that Ethelflaed seems to talk about is Uhtred, and how Uhtred has all this popularity amongst the people of Wessex, surviving slavery, helping Alfred take out Guthrum and making him and converting him to Christianity, all his other heroics and all the stuff he's done over the years, So he's clearly jealous of Uhtred at this point, and that's something that his earldom friend doesn't really say that out loud, but he says that both him and Uhtred are jealous of each other. I love how he seems very manipulative and knows how to spin things, especially when it comes to Ethelred. He says that clearly that both him and Uhtred have a very important place right now, especially when it comes to Alfred. But he said that he feels as though that Ethelred could take advantage of the fact that since Uhtred is a Dane and there is some little bit of tension between him and Alfred, that maybe he could use that, Ethelred could use that to his benefit to get more to Alfred's favor. So after the wedding, there's this scene in which Uhtred is basically called up to the table, where the blushing bride and husband and Alfred and Oda and his wife are basically eating. So Alfred is kind of pissed at Uhtred for the simple fact that he didn't tell Uhtred, that Uhtred didn't tell him about the army that was coming. Like, that was basically, in London and Mercia. And Uhtred's like, well, Lord, I told you to prepare your men because it was too long, to be honest, where like it was too peaceful for them not to have tried to come back, basically. And he also was asked by Alfred, or I believe by Ethelred and his earldom friend, basically his earl friend, why was he over in the Danish lands? And keep in mind, in episode like the previous episode, that Alfred was pissed at the fact that Uhtred was always in the Danish land, but this obviously served even more of a purpose because of what was revealed. So, as I mentioned in the last episode, Uhtred and company were told this prophecy that he would end up being the king of Mercia. So, basically, Uhtred mentions that to Alfred, because Alfred asked him the question. So, this puts Alfred, in a great state of, what's the word can I put? A great sense of terror, even though he doesn't outwardly show it. Alfred's very good at having a very stoic face, while at the same time you look at his eyes, you can see the anger and the conflict and the fear raging within him. So, after that, when Uhtred is basically given permission to leave, we have basically Ethelred and Alfred and Alfred's friend, the Earl, basically talking about where Uhtred's loyalties lie. And basically, Ethelflaed, so she's defending Uhtred. She's like, listen, this dude's done so much for us, and he gave us the honest truth about how he was able to stop to begin with by cutting off Siegfried's hand and basically making a deal with his brother Eric. So, that's it. There's nothing more to discuss. So, after that, we have this intense scene between Alfred and Oda. So, Alfred makes it clear, even though Oda does say to Alfred, listen, he sacrificed so much for us. Why should we question his loyalty? Alfred's like, well, he's a Dane, and and he refuses to submit to me, and like basically Alfred's making excuses. I mean, it's kind of like Alfred said in the previous episode. He's just trying to find reasons to dislike Uhtred. In a way, it's very similar to Guthred, because Alfred, much like Guthred, observes that Uhtred is very charismatic. He's a warrior, unlike them. He's charismatic. He leads his men in the field, and he can't help but gain a large following. And despite Alfred having that same ability, there's one thing him and Uhtred doesn't have in common. He's not a warrior, really. He's an intellectual. And that's what makes Alfred paranoid. And just adds the fact that Uhtred was raised as a Dane, makes it even more scary for him. Even he admits to Oda that Uhtred's an enemy he'd rather not fight because he knows a good chance he might lose if he fights Uhtred. And not just one-on-one, but just in terms of, support. But if he has to, he has to. So, after that, we have this scene in which, I believe, like before Uhtred was sent off, by the way, him and Ethelred are supposed to go together to go to London, to Mercia, to basically estimate the number of Dane soldiers there and the town, basically. So when they go there, Uhtred has his men, and Ethelred has his earldom friend and his other men. And he was wondering why was Uhtred so good at, like, how did he know the city, basically? And Uhtred said as a young boy, when he was the son of Earl, adopted son of Earl Ragnar the Younger, he spent a good amount of time in the town of London. So that's how he knows the streets so well. And it's something that Ethelred just couldn't help but take a jab at him for, saying, hey, you mean when you were a Dane, a dirty Dane, basically? So Uhtred kept his temper in check. So we have this scene when Uhtred meets the two brothers again, Siegfried and Eric. Now, he met Eric, beforehand. Like I mentioned before in the previous episode, we hasn't seen Siegfried in like years. So they have a little bit of banter. At one point, we had Uhtred saying, I'm surprised, Siegfried, you don't want to kill me after me cutting off your hand. And Siegfried said, you know what, I did for a point, wanted to kill you, but I like this really cool new arm or hand I got. The only problem is sometimes it's hard just to wipe my ass. It was just hilarious, It didn't seem to be that much hard feelings between them, but they are Danes, so it's like, whatever, Besides that, they're making fun of Ethelred. They don't really think he's that much of a concern. They think he's kind of a wuss, to be honest with you, even though he's trying to find a way to pay them off. Wondering how much it will take for pay them off. Basically like something that Alfred suggested to them, because Alfred is very keen on basically keeping the peace, while Uhtred is like, dude, there's no point keeping the peace. You're gonna have to literally physically push them out. But Alfred is Alfred. He's stubborn, and so on and so forth. So it brings us to this scene in which Uhtred and his men observe basically this poor monk crucified, dead. And there's another monk who they were going to crucify, but Uhtred said, listen, why crucify him? There's no fun in that. Let him earn his freedom. And that monk was the same monk that Alfred had sent to the Siegfried and Eric to negotiate, some type of deal, some type of money, you guys get what I'm saying. So that guy, I believe he was a monk or father, like Punic, I think that's his last name. So we see him at first. He sucks at fighting. At first, you're like, okay, this is gonna be easy work for this Danish warrior. And then you see this guy just flip the switch, and he basically has this guy at knife point, and he basically mocks everybody, saying, "Listen, I don't want to kill this boy because his mother must be worried." So Siegfried is enraged by this, and he kills the guy, or at least he cuts the Viking guy's throat a little bit. He says, yo, how did you feign the fact that you could fight this well? And the guy was like, listen, I'm a Briton. Like, we're used to fighting Saxons for all these years and decades, okay? I know how to fight. So Siegfried wanted him to join his army, but he was like, nah, I want my freedom, and I'd rather go back with Uhtred and company to Wessex. So, yeah. Besides that, we see that the relationship between Ethelred and Ethelflaed is is dead. It's nothing to it. It's just a political marriage. There's no love, especially on Ethelflaed's, her part. At one point, she was abused, by Ethelred, like like the punk that he is. And also in this episode, I think he even asked Father Bioka to make sure that she was a virgin, because of his jealousy of Uhtred. He probably thinks that Uhtred and her had a physical relationship, stuff like that. It was just very, what the hellish. But besides that, we had this interesting scene between Alfred, Uhtred, and Ethelred, which was observed by Bioka, Stepa, and Ethelred's earldom friend. So Alfred makes clear that he's frustrated at Uhtred because of the fact that he doesn't know Uhtred. And by not knowing Uhtred, it's harping back to what I said before. Uhtred does things his own way, and he's not submissive to anybody. And that's something that Alfred, who is trying to be the king of all England and the king of Wessex, just can't stand about him. And also the fact that Uhtred can't be controlled, and Uhtred's a Dane, and he doesn't understand Uhtred. That's the thing that pisses him off the most. As smart as Alfred is, he can find ways to try to understand where someone's coming from or understand the person. But Uhtred is like, he just can't get him. And that's what really frustrates him. And he lets his insecurity and his frustrations basically lead to his own daughter getting captured by the end of the episode. Because instead of listening to Uhtred's sound advice about how to attack London in the forts, he goes with Ethelred's advice. And basically, he sends off Uhtred. He's like, listen, I want you to leave the court. So Oda, basically, knowing that Alfred was wrong for this, and he was just throwing a temper tantrum, basically, because he wasn't getting his little way like he always does. He says to Uhtred, listen, just stay with Alfred for now, or at least just stay with him, for now, because he's gonna need you, Please just stay with him. Because he knows Alfred was unfair and had like a little itch, who just pleading for Uhtred to stay with him. And Uhtred's like, how can I remain loyal to someone who don't trust me? Despite everything I do is literally in his best interest. So we see Alfred basically even say this to his wife, saying that it's kind of the same thing I've been saying. He's frustrated with the fact that his best friend, or basically his most powerful ally, is a heathen. And he feels as though this is God's punishment towards him, and that each day it eats at his soul and all this crap. It's like wham, cry me a river. So eventually, Ethelflaed is able to convince her husband to let her be around the battlefield, basically. Not into the battlefield, obviously, but around the battlefield, like camp and all that stuff. So I believe Thora actually joins Bioka, because Bioka's going to be there as well. So they go to London, right? And everyone thinks, well, basically Ethelred believed that the fight was going to happen in London, in Mercia. But it was a trick. Siegfried and Eric saw it coming. And they instead went over to their camp and killed every man and woman in the camp except for Ethelflaed. So they kidnapped Ethelflaed. So that's basically how the episode ended. Ethelred screwed up, and Alfred's pride and his insecurity basically led to his daughter possibly getting killed. So yeah, I'll give this episode like a 9 out of 10. If I miss anything, please write some comments down below in the comment section. And once again, thank you guys for watching my review. Adios.